Okay, so we'll begin now with a small prayer in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day
Give
our
us this
daily
day our
bread.
daily
Forgive us
bread
our
and forgive us our
trespasses as we
trespasses
forgive those who
as we
trespass
forgive those who
against us.
trespass
Lead us
against
not
us.
into
And
temptation, but deliver us
temptation
from
deliver us
evil.
from evil. Amen.
Lord Jesus Christ, we present to you all our families. We want to grow in the example of the Holy Family, and to reflect God's grace in our families. Allow us to understand what your will is and to also bring forth children who will be saints. Mother Mary, intercede for us and always be with us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And we have Tony and Femia Maroor from Chicago with us, a family that is pro-life. And our main presenter will be Femia today, and she has a degree in theology. We would like to hear the name of all the kids and the details of her parenting style. She's very cognizant of the current environments that Catholics have to raise their kids. So for her insights, her insights will be very important to hear. So she's also into the homeschooling, and there are so much to say, but we will hear from her. So without further ado, let's welcome Femia and listen to her. Welcome, Femia and Tony.
Thank you. Yeah, Tony is not here. He will be here, hopefully. I told him to join as soon as he's able to. So thank you, Achin, for having me. My name is Femia. Tony and I have been married. We will be married 12 years in about next week. So Thanksgiving weekend, we got married. So almost 12 years. So we have 7 children. Within 10 years, we had 7 kids. So that's a lot of kids in a short period of time. But our oldest is 11 and our youngest is 14 months. So we have 11-year-old Ian. Then we have a 10-year-old Zelly, who's named after Saint Zelly Martin, who is the mother of Saint Therese of Lisieux. Then we have Kiara, who is 8. We have Cassia, who's named after Saint Rita of Cassia, a great saint. She is 5. Then we have Sheen, who's named after Fulton Sheen. He is 4. Then we have Selah, who is 2. And we have Louisa, who is 14 months. So that's kind of the age range of our children. So they're all still pretty young. So, but that is what it is. We started homeschooling our kids. This will be my 4th year. So they initially started off in school, and then we made the switch to homeschooling, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But mainly, Achin had sent me some of your questions, and there's a lot of really good questions, and there were a lot of questions. So I'm going to do the best I can to answer them the best way I can. I don't know if I'll get to all of it, but I will try my best to get to the most. And then at the end, if there's some lingering questions, maybe I can get to those as well. So now before I start, I have to say this because okay, I have to say this. So I learn all the time how to be a parent, right? So I am still learning, and my way of learning is by observing, other mothers, other fathers, and then, who are older than me, talking to them. I've gained a lot of, knowledge and wisdom. And then I've also even learned from parents who are younger than me, who have small children, and I look at them and I learn. So I'm always learning. So me saying these things, it's simply me sharing my own experiences and my insights, right? So my kids are still really young. I don't know how they're going to turn out. I hope they turn out great, but you do everything that you can, right? You do the best you can, and God takes up our sacrifices, our efforts, and our goodwill, and He he does what he wills with it, you know? So I just want to say that because I think a lot of times we have so much anxiety as parents to say, oh my gosh, I have to do this and that and this and that. And then so my kids will turn out right. And, you know, ultimately, I think the first thing that we have to realize is we do that the best that we can, make that sincere effort, and God sees those efforts and he transforms them, right? He makes them fruitful within our children, because at the end of the day, they are also individuals. I know maybe many of you have like really small children, so it's hard to like imagine them as adults, right? Making their own decisions, having their own free will, but they will have that one day, right? And they will be adults in a world where they will have their own free will and their own choices. So like what we're doing as parents is to like form them as best as we can, to be adults. So I always tell, you know, I always say we're not raising children, we're raising adults, right? You know, just think about that for a second, right? We're not raising children. They are little right now, but one day they will be adults. And so that's kind of like the mentality or like the mindset we kind of have to have. So before we begin, I wanted you guys to do like a very small exercise, right? So if you have a piece of paper or a pen or something near you, if you can grab that and you can just individually, like even if you're sitting together as husband and wife, individually, if you can sit and answer these questions by yourselves, like even if it's in your phone, it's totally fine. But just answer these two questions, okay? So the first question, and I am very not tech savvy, okay? So this may not work, but I have the questions written here. So is everyone able to see my screen? Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, so these are the two questions, right? The first question is, what is the foremost or ultimate goal of your life right now? So what is life's purpose for you at this moment? And then the second question is, what is the most important job or role you find for yourself today? So like in your life as a whole, if you were to answer this question today, right? What is the foremost ultimate goal of your life? And what is life's purpose for you at this moment? And then the second question is, what is the most important job or role you have for yourself today? I'm just going to give you like 10 more seconds. It doesn't have to be anything. This is just for yourself, just to have like an exercise. Okay. So for the first question, right? I'm not going to ask you guys to share your answers or anything like that, but the foremost goal when you're talking about a Christian life, our foremost goal is ultimately holiness, right? Holiness, sanctity, that's our foremost goal. Now, many of you may have written many different things, and that's totally fine, because that's, you know, the point of it is not to tell you like, oh, this is the wrong answer, this is the right answer, right? But my point is, as a Christian and as a Catholic, our foremost goal is to be saints, right? It's to be sanctified. And the most important job that you have as a married person with children is to be a spouse and a parent, right? So this is kind of the like place that I'm coming from in this talk, right? Everything in this talk is going to go back to these 2 points. What's our ultimate goal? It's sanctity, it's sainthood. And what's the most important job? The most important job that you have is, I see some children sitting in the screens, right? They're the children. They are your foremost goal, right? That is your job. So everything that we talk about, all the answers that I'm going to be giving into these questions is going to be based off of those two things. So given those two things in mind, right? Where do we go from there? So that means Christ is at the center of everything that we do. So what does that mean? What does that look like? That means that we as individuals should always be pursuing a faithful life, a virtuous life. So we are always working on ourselves and our own imperfections, right? That doesn't mean just that we go to church and we do all the, physically do all the things that we're supposed to do. It means that we are inwardly trying to do the work that it takes to become more holy. Now, why am I spending so much time talking about this? Well, it's because with children, right, there's a famous saying that more is caught than taught, right? More is caught than taught. So if your spiritual life, if your faith life is not in order, you cannot fool a child into thinking that it is. Kids will know instantly whether you are faking it or not. So if you are half-heartedly going through life, doing all of these things, the children will know. And then when you tell them to do this, this, and this, they're going to look at you and say, well, they might not say it to you, but all of the things that you say will be meaningless. Maybe until until they go away to college, they'll tolerate all of your, everything that you say, but there will be no inner work that has changed in them, right? And that's not what we want. What we want is ultimately for our children to go to heaven, right? We want our children to go to heaven. That is our goal. So doing all these external things and kind of showing others or showing to the world that they are good and behaved, and none of that matters if their heart is not in the right place. And their heart will only be in the right place if your heart is in the right place and you are pursuing the right things in your life, which they will see. So more is caught than taught. Okay, so that's the first point. Now, another question that was asked was, what's the difference? So I'm just going to go through these questions. Okay, I'm trying to go as fast as I can to make sure that we cover as much ground as possible. Another question that was asked was about fathers and mothers and their roles in parenting, and if there's different roles in fathers and mothers. And the short answer to that question is absolutely yes. Okay, there's absolutely yes, but then there's also no, right? Now, what do I mean by that? A father has a place that a mother can never take, and a mother has a place that a father can never take. And the number one priority in your family life should be your marriage. Above your children, above your parents, the priority is you. As a wife, your priority is your husband. And as a husband, your priority is your wife. And if you truly make that happen, your children will be set. They will understand that mom and dad are on the same page. They're on the same team. You cannot divide us. You cannot conquer us by dividing us. We're on the same page. So the only way the parents can be on the same page is if you make your marriage a priority. Now, this is very taboo, right? In our culture, പിള്ളേർക്ക് വേണ്ടി എല്ലാം ചെയ്തു കൊടുക്കും, right? It's like everything is for the parents. പിള്ളേർക്ക് വേണ്ടിയാ ജീവിക്കുന്നത്, right? And that's like the mindset that is like encouraged among the families, right? And sometimes even with our own parents, sometimes they'll come and they'll maybe start to gossip a little bit about your husband's family or your wife's family, or they'll say, oh, avarenna angane cheyyunne, allengi never let any of that stuff enter into your marriage. You stop it right there. That the moment that enters into your marriage, bad news. You're creating like a little crack for Satan to come into your life, and you stop that right there. Okay. So number one priority is your spouse. If you make your spouse, so now speaking from a wife's perspective, right? If I make my husband my number one priority, and if I give him the respect that he deserves, because husbands, they desire respect. Wives desire, anybody know? What do wives desire? Love. Wives desire love. Husbands want respect. For a husband, he'd rather feel respected than loved, whereas a wife would rather feel loved than respected, right? So if you respect a husband the way he deserves to be respected, he will naturally give love to his wife. It's just he can't help it. He just pours love into his wife. Same thing when a woman feels loved, she will naturally respect her husband. There's like, it's just like, it's kind of a chicken or the egg kind of situation, right? Like it just kind of naturally happens. And when one is, even in my own marriage, when I'm feeling irritated with my husband, like I can feel him pull away his love because he doesn't feel like he's being respected in the way he deserves to be respected, and vice versa, right? When mom respects dad and gives him priority, what do you think the kids see? Caught, then taught. You can tell them all you want. Respect your dad, listen to your dad. You can tell them all you want, but if mom is not doing it, kids don't care. They don't care. Same thing, if dad is not loving mom, right? Loving her with his whole being, sacrificing for her, doing things without being asked, and just, doing all these things for his wife, right? Do you think the children will respect their mother? No, they won't respect. They won't love, right? They won't love their mother. They won't respect it. So that relationship between the husband and the wife are so pivotal in parenting. So again, the reason why I'm talking about it is because with relation to children, it's so, so important. Finally, as a family unit, what's really helpful, and this is kind of like more of a practical tip, I would say, it's very important for the family to have a mission together, right? So we always, like in our family, right? We are a family mission. So we have a mission as a family. What's our mission? If you ask my kids, what's our mission? Holiness. We want to go to heaven. We want to be saints. Okay. How are we going to do that? We're going to sacrifice. We're going to be kind. We're going to strive for holiness. Now, you have to verbalize these things to your children. It's not enough to just have it in your own mind and say it to yourself and, have these goals in your head. You have to verbalize it to your children. You have to tell them, and also with certain virtues, right? When they're, when my son is having a tough time, when I'm homeschooling them, let's say, and he's having a tough time with math, and he just wants to give up. He's like, I can't do this. This is too hard. I don't know how to do this. It's like, Maroors, we don't quit. Maroors don't quit. We're not a family of quitters. Are you a Maroor? Yes, I'm a Maroor. Then you don't quit. It's not an option, right? So do we need to take a break? Okay, we'll take a break. We'll take a break, but we're not quitters, was that actually, if they're having a little, fight over something, okay, were you being kind to your sister? Is that holy behavior? No. So how are you going to make it better? I'll have to go say sorry, right? Like they will come up with their own answers if they know what their mission is, if they know what they're supposed to do, if they know who they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to behave, then they themselves will correct their behavior. So when you have this mentality of a family unit being on a mission, what naturally starts to happen is relationships will start to form between parents and children and among the children themselves. Here's another tip. Rules without relationship are meaningless. Rules without relationships are meaningless. So if you have no relationship, you have no connection to your children, you can tell them anything and they'll say no. And once they say no, what are you going to do? Give them time out, hit them, yell at them? Like, is it really? And then maybe with the pain of whatever, you know, they're feeling, they might go do that thing, but is their heart affected? Did they change anything about their real behavior? No, nothing has changed. They just did the action, right? But nothing has changed internally. Their spirit is not, you know, any different. Now, those of you who are interested, there is a really good book, and maybe I'll give Achin the name of the book. It's called Hold On to Your Kids. It's a book that was written in the 90s, and it's one of my favorites because it's based on attachment theory, which is a theory in psychology that has to do with parental relationship with their children. So essentially what the book talks about is, in our modern society, what has happened is children naturally, as God has created. Okay, now this is not a religious book. Okay, this is a purely psychology based book. But you know, if you think about it, the way God has created humanity, right? The human family unit, mother, father, and children. And there is a natural relationship that forms a relationship of need and attachment and fulfillment. So what happens is, you know, over the course of time, children should have a certain kind of attachment to their parents, and that attachment is developed based on their needs and how their needs are met by their parents. Now, you know, I'm sure in this group we don't have to talk about like physical needs, right? We know how to fulfill our kids' physical needs, feeding them, clothing them, sending them to school. We know how to do all of those things. That's not a problem that we have in our current culture, right? But also the emotional and psychological needs. So when those needs are met by the parents with their children, they start to form the proper attachment with their children. Now, when they're really little, when they're, you know, up to like 3 years old, 2 years old, it's really easy, right? Because all you have to do is you just feed them, right? You go put them to sleep. You know, it's just purely a physical thing. But as they get older, 2, 3, 4 years old, now they're demanding more and more from you as a parent emotionally. And we have, remember, our number one priority is our children, right? We have that obligation to give of ourselves entirely, emotionally, psychologically, whatever they need, they have the right to that from us as parents. They have the right to that, right? And so we have that obligation to give that to them. And therefore, that gives them the proper attachment to us. Once you have formed that relationship with your children, and this takes time, but once you form that relationship with your children, disciplining is so much easier because now they want to please you. The relationship between mother and father, you know, like as I mentioned with their children, is totally different, right? Sometimes, you know, and I was talking about this with Tony, he should be here soon, but you know, he was saying, you know, sometimes a little bad cop, good cop thing is not too bad, right? But what shouldn't happen is one person is always the bad cop and one person is always the good cop, right? There has to be like some kind of like a balance to that relationship that they see with their parents. They should see both sides of both people so that it doesn't seem like, you know, one person is always like, you know, saying no and like the other person is always saying yes and is a pushover, right? It should be some kind of balance there. But once the parents have, you know, attached, you know, the children are attached properly to their parents, then disciplining becomes so much easier. The relationship that children have with their father is a reflection. It is often a model of how they view God. So moms, I really want you guys to hear this because this is so important. Okay? The relationship, the way children have a relationship with their father, the relationship that they have with their father is mirroring the relationship that they will have, the way they will see God. So imagine how important that relationship is. So you as a mother have, and a wife, have every obligation to foster that relationship the best you can. Now, does that mean that fathers are going to, now, does that put the pressure on the fathers to be perfect all the time, just like our Heavenly Father? No, absolutely not. That's not possible. Sorry to break it to you. No matter how much you try, it's not going to happen, right? But I think what's important to see there, right, is that they should always see their father as protector, as the masculine male in relationship in their life, right? And so that's also like very important, and also related to attachment. So if they're not properly attached even to their father, right, they will have issues later on in their spiritual lives to like actually have like a good relationship with God the Father. One story in my own life, like with my children, comes to mind. So Cassia, she's my fourth, right? One day she was she did something she wasn't supposed to do, and she knew she did it, and she felt really bad after she did it. Now, most children, okay, and I wasn't here. I wasn't home at the time. Tony was home with the kids. So most children, what would they do? If they did something wrong, like what is the natural thing to do? They run away, they hide, right? They try to get away from the situation because they're like scared of the consequences, right? That's what we did when we were younger. What Cassia did was she started to cry, and she ran to Tony. She just ran to Tony and she just started crying, right? And so Tony was like, what's going on? Like, obviously he didn't know what had happened. And she just can't stop crying because she knew she did something wrong. She did it on purpose. She meant to do it, but she regretted it, right? And Tony was so moved by that. They ended up figuring out what happened, and, they consoled or whatever. But Tony was so touched by that. I wish he was here to talk about it, but I was so touched by that because, she did exactly what she was supposed to do, right? What you're supposed to do is you go to your Heavenly Father. When we do something wrong, we go to our Heavenly Father and we say, I am so sorry, please forgive me, right? I'm so sorry, please forgive me. I won't do it again. I'm so sorry, right? That's exactly what you're supposed to do. And that's what she did, right? It's mirroring that relationship that we have with our Heavenly Father, right? Now, how does that happen? So now let's talk about like situations where disciplining is important. Clear expectations and follow through. That is, to me, that is the key to disciplining our children. Clear expectations and follow through. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so clear expectations. That means they have been told in plain language that they can understand, whatever their age is, okay? Exactly what you want from them. Exactly. Nothing more, nothing less. Exactly what your expectations are. You tell them exactly what it is. You might have to tell them a couple times. They're children. They might not understand it right away. They might not get it right away, but you tell them clearly in plain ways that they can understand as children what your expectations are. Then, what is the follow through? It means that you universally apply that rule. Okay? So this is again why the relationship between husband and wife is so important. It's not like, oh, when Amma is home or mom is home, this is what can happen. And when dad is home, this is what's happening. No. It has to be the same. Everybody is on the same page. Because again, remember, you guys are a team. Okay? You're a team. You cannot be on two different teams. You're on one team, and the kids know that, right? So you tell them, both of you have, now again, this requires both of you to communicate very clearly with one another and have that expectation with one another that, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to stick to it. Okay. So clear expectations, they know what it is, and follow through. That means that if they don't do what you ask them to do, there's a consequence for that action. Now, some dads, I don't know, maybe it's my bias because Tony is such a softie, okay? But some dads are like, oh, oh, it's okay. This time it's okay, especially with girls. I know. I have 5 girls, so I know how dads are with girls, okay? So, oh, it's okay. This time it's okay. No. Especially when you're establishing these rules, right? Follow through is so important. It doesn't mean there's no room for mercy once in a while. That's not what I'm saying. But if we're trying to get on the same page with our children, everything has to be very clear, and everybody has to be on the same page. Now, this requires the husband and wife to be on the same page. It also requires you as parents to have the discipline to follow through, right? So you have to have the discipline to say to yourself, to your spouse, we are going to do this. This is going to happen, and every time it's going to happen. So does that make sense to everybody? Zoom's so hard because I can never get a response from you guys.
Actually, feel free to interact also when she's asking questions. Please.
Yeah. You guys don't have to be like all muted and silent, okay? So if you feel free. Okay. Now, just one more thing I wanted to talk about before moving on is about mothers and fathers and fighting. This was one of the questions I got a couple of times, right? Is it okay to fight in front of our kids? So this is kind of funny because anyways, is it okay to fight in front of our kids? It depends on how you fight. Okay? It's good to fight well. Now, what does that mean? To fight well? It means like somebody wins? Is it like, like somebody's, are we going to get good fight in? No, that's not what it means, right? To fight well means to fight with respect to one another, right? Now, if you know that this is going to be blowing up into a situation where there's going to be screaming and yelling and crying and all sorts of stuff, then it needs to be outside of the, situation of the, children, right? But if this is a situation where you can both have a respectable conversation with one another, then absolutely I would even say it's a good thing to have that disagreement or argument in front of your children. Why is that? Because in today's world, right, in the modern world that we live in, disagreeing with somebody is almost seen as like a moral issue. Like as soon as you disagree with somebody, you can start to paint them as like an immoral person, as a bad person, as an evil person, right? If you don't see exactly eye to eye on somebody, then they're wrong and they're bad, right? But when you model good ways of disagreeing with one another, that's actually a very good lesson for your children to know and understand how to disagree, how to fight, but do it in a respectable way with one another. Because our children know. If we're not on good terms with our spouses, like our children know, they know that something's up, again, like kids know a lot more than we think they know. Everybody tends to think that children are not smart. They don't pick up on stuff. They know everything. They know everything that's going on. It's just that they don't know how to express it, in the way that we might imagine. So fight, but fight well, fight good. Fight in a way that's modeled, like that you would want them to model in their own marriages and in their own life. I always think of it as this way, right? When I'm having a disagreement with Tony, I think of like how my son's future wife would argue with him. Am I arguing with him the way that I want my son's future wife to argue with my son? And if the answer is no, then I should probably change the way I'm behaving, right? And same thing, you know, if the way Tony is talking to me, if the way he's speaking to me is not the way that, you know, we want our daughters to think is okay for their future spouse to speak to them, then he should stop the way he's talking to me. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh man. Okay, I have to get through these. All right. So the next question that came up a lot is, how do we raise our children to be faithful Catholics? And how do we so I kind of touched on that already. Like the basic fundamental part of that is your family unit, your own spiritual life, your own faith life, and integrating your faith life into your family life, right? So for example, you know, for us as a family, we have a family patron. Our family patron saint is Saint Michael. So the kids know that, you know, our 4-year-old, 2-year-old even knows parts of the St. Michael prayer, because we're always praying to St. Michael. You know, we get in the car, we're praying to St. Michael. We say the St. Michael prayer. When we need, you know, when somebody is scared, we say the St. Michael prayer. When in the morning we wake up and we have a family prayer, family morning prayer together. My husband's off, you know, he's usually working, so he's not necessarily part of it, but we sit down together, you know, small little prayers, right? Like, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, I love you. Or doing the morning offering. It doesn't have to be anything like big, elaborate, crazy, you know, like we're not, you know, we're living family life, right? We're not living a monastic life. We're not monks. We're not sisters. We're not priests, like you know, we're not living in convents. We're living in families, right? And so whatever little thing we do, we offer that up as what we can do. And that's it. And we make our, you know, our best efforts. Family prayer in the evening, especially with dads. Okay. Especially with dads, you know, there's something so powerful when a child sees their dad on his knees. When a child sees his dad on his knees praying, that is powerful. That is powerful. There is very few things that are more powerful than that. Moms can sit there and pray all day long. And we will continue to pray all day long, no matter what. You know, I'm sure when they go to high school, when they go to college, when they're getting married, you know, we're going to be there praying all the time. Our kids are always going to see that. Okay. But when a father sits and prays with his family, when a father stands in line for confession, you know, can you imagine? What does that do to the heart of a child, right? My dad is asking for forgiveness from his heavenly Father, right? There is something so powerful about that. Okay, so making faith a part of daily life. Initially, it will be very weird, right? Because we're going to be talking about Jesus and Mary, and we're not used to talking about it like out loud like that. But I promise you that if you do it consistently, that it will naturally become a part of your life, and it will just naturally start integrating into your life. So prayers in the morning, prayers before meals, prayers in the evening, and also using Jesus and holiness, right? Your goal as a family is to become holy, right? Now, why did you do that? Is that leading you to holiness? Is that what you did just now? Is that helping you to become a saint, or is that not helping you to become a saint? You know, talk to your guardian angel. You know, we are so lucky as, you know, Catholics to have so many devotions, one of which is our guardian angel, right? I tell my kids all the time, you know, did you talk to your guardian angel? Are you listening to your guardian angel, or are you listening to something else, right? And guardian angel is always with you. So these little things, you know, it doesn't take a lot, but just to create that family culture of faith is so important. Now, another question that came up a lot was, how do we train our children to act properly at Qurbana, or Mass? Now, there will be a couple things I'll say about this. It is a process. And you have to be patient with them. And things change very much depending on their age. Now, the number one thing to do about Mass is to take them frequently. Okay, so if you can take them to Mass frequently, they will get used to the idea of being in that space where they should act differently than they do in other spaces, right? It's just a psychological thing. They know that when they get there, this is a different environment. It's a different way. I need to behave differently. So they will naturally learn that. Now, the other thing is, again, showing them like, oh, this is a place where we, worship. This is, Jesus is there. We're there to see Jesus, and so having that kind of like repetition of things. Now, the other thing is we cannot expect our children to act perfectly during Mass, and that's okay. A church that is not crying is dying, right? If there are no little children in that church is doomed. There's going to be nobody there, to go back. So a little bit of crying. I've never met a priest, and I've asked many priests, and Achin, maybe I'm wrong, but I've asked many priests, and, because I myself, especially when my oldest were really little, I always felt so bad that my children were making noises in church, I've never met a single priest who said that bothered them. It never bothers the priest, right? Now, of course, there's situations where if they're screaming and yelling, yes, of course, you have to excuse them and take them out because it's distracting to other people. But if they're simply sitting there and maybe they're holding a book and it falls, and maybe they're walking across the aisle, that's all okay. It's all okay because God created them like that, right?
Really, I'm actually just going to say a small example from this community itself. One of them, so I was giving communion to one of the boys, one of the young ones, and he was the last one to come. And he came in, and I was giving communion to his dad, and he looked at me and said, Joseph Acha. I've never seen him speak or something. Like that filled my day, actually. So just letting you be happy when kids are there in church.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I think a lot of it is like in our own minds and we're so self-conscious, but our children, God created them to make noise, right? God created them to be like antsy and walking around. My son the other day was really annoying me, but he was like on the pew, and he's just like sliding back and forth all the way up, all the way down, all the way up. He wasn't making any noise. He wasn't bothering anybody. It was bothering me only, right? But it wasn't bothering anybody. But he's the boy. He's got energy, and that's how God created him, and that's okay, right? And so some of it is us just allowing those things to happen. But I think as they grow, just be patient with them. As they grow, they will start to notice the people around them. They will start to notice and understand, oh, this is how I should behave. They will start to pick up on that. And occasionally giving them a gentle reminder, once they get to 4 years old, they should know what's expected of them. And once they get there, you kind of gently say, oh, look, where are we looking? We got to look that way. And just gently reminding them of why we're there and what we're doing there. But there was a survey out a couple years ago about they had interviewed or they had surveyed I think it was close to like 3,000 Catholics or something, and ex-Catholics, right? And most of them who said that they were no longer practicing their faith. One of the reasons why they did that is because they had they were given a negative emotional experience around the faith, right? Some kind of negative emotional experience. So maybe they felt like there was too many demands on them, or they didn't have a good connection to, the people who were there at church. They didn't have some sort of negative like emotional experience, right? So what we don't want is for them to think that they don't belong there, because they do belong there. They're children, they belong there, right? And so that's important to, now, is it okay to, you know, I think so, one of the questions was, is it okay to bring books and things like that? I mean, if they're really, I would say that's really up to the parents. I've seen parents, very good, faithful families, faithful parents, bring like Catholic books to church and have the kids like look through them. And I've seen not, you know, my children at this point, like they do not need anything. They will simply be there, and they will fidget with something that's there. Maybe they will look around, but they don't need anything physical to occupy them. One thing that we don't do is we never give them any sort of snacks or anything to eat inside the church. That's kind of like where we draw the line. If they do need something, we take them to the back and they have it outside. But that's, again, like a boundary that Tony and I have drawn with our children, because that's where we feel comfortable. But, you know, of course, there are situations where, you know, you can't leave. Maybe you have a newborn baby with you and you're by yourself and your 2-year-old wants a snack. What are you going to do? You know, like, you might not have the option. So those were just some practical things, I think, that were brought up. Now, sorry if I'm like going really fast, but another question that came up was the question of the LGBTQ issues, and how do we equip our children to deal with it, or do we just kind of like let them, you know, kind of navigate that on their own? So what I will say about that is 2 things. One, there's a difference between sheltering our children and protecting them. Okay. So sheltering means that you are hiding them from a certain problem temporarily. Okay. So we seek shelter in a tornado or something like that. Okay. So sometimes parents feel the need to hide their children away from some issue, right? Then there's the thing of protecting their children. Protecting is a little bit different, right? Protecting means that you give them the tools to face whatever it is that they have to in the long term. Okay? So you're maybe curbing a certain issue for a time being so that they can deal with those issues properly in the right way, right? So we have weapons for protection, right? Because the weapon for protection is to take care of an issue that's impending, right? You get the weapon right now so that you can protect yourself later. Does that make sense? So that's like the difference. So there's a difference between sheltering and protecting. So we do not want to shelter our children alone. Okay? We want to protect them. Now, what does that mean? Protecting our children means that we give them what they can handle at the stage that they're ready to handle it. So when a child is little, right? When a child is really small, their world, or what their brain or their mind is able to comprehend or understand, is this much, right? And so you have to give them information that they can handle this much. As they get older, as their world expands, you expand what they're able to handle, and you give them that information when they're able to handle it. Now, the problem with our world today is there's a lot of things that are being pushed on our children that they're not ready or capable as children to understand or to handle. Now, what can we do about that? There's only a few things that we can do about that. We can do our best to protect them and give them the tools to hold on to their innocence for as long as we possibly can, right? So when it comes to the LGBTQ issues, what we can do is we can tell them the truth, right? Why did God create us? Well, who created us? God, right? Why did he create us? What is the purpose of our lives? These are like the fundamental building blocks of our faith, right? And once they know those things, those are principles that they can use to help themselves understand these issues later on. So how do we equip them? We equip them by helping them to know what the church teaches and what God has in mind in creation. So naturally, when they get to that point where they have to tackle these issues, they will be able to tackle them, right? Based on principle, not by what some random person in their school said. Does that make sense? So it has to come from a logical place. Now, I'll leave it at that. I guess if you have any specific questions, we can talk about that later. But that is how I would go with that. And it's the same thing with questions of chastity in men, boys and girls, right? Another question was like, how do we raise children to be chaste, right? And I always, so I taught, high school for a little bit. I taught high school philosophy and theology for a little bit at an all girls Catholic high school, right? And a lot of these girls, they're very much influenced by the current, feminist culture, right? The second wave feminism. And they're very against this idea that, somebody could tell them what they can wear, right? Because that's where chastity usually, where it goes to, right? Modesty usually goes to this idea of like what you can wear. But I always, like my point and even the point of the church is to say modesty actually begins in the heart. Okay. So first and foremost, modesty and chastity is in the heart, right? From the heart, our behavior reflects what's in our heart. So if we are modest in our heart, meaning we are not trying to show off to anybody, right? We're not trying to be like, to have any attention from anybody, then that will be naturally reflected in the way we dress, in the way we behave, in the way we act. It's just natural. So that is kind of like where you have to begin with children. And also when they are in the age of understanding their bodies and being aware of their bodies, you obviously, naturally put them in clothing that is modest, that is chaste, so that they can, and this is really hard. I think this is really, really hard for moms, especially Indian moms, right? Because when you go, there's a lot of like cute stuff out there that's got like spaghetti straps and like backless and all this stuff, right? And they see kids at church maybe or at a party who are wearing this and that. And they look at that and they say, oh, that looks so nice. I want, and they don't even have any idea why that's wrong or why they shouldn't do that, but they just see that somebody else is wearing it and they think it's pretty, maybe it's good colors and and they think it's okay. And this is usually where the dads are like, nope, no way, my daughter's not wearing that. And then the mom is like, no, that's so cute, oh, she should wear that, it's okay, we make all these excuses, right? But this is again where this is a situation where what is our long-term goal, right? Where are we headed here? Is it the now that matters or is it the holiness, right? Is holiness our goal? So if holiness is our goal, then we have to sacrifice these like small moments, right? To move them into that mindset of chastity and mindset of modesty. It's funny because now my son, when my daughters are wearing like my daughter's Holy Communion dress, it had a little bit of net from here to here, right? It was just mesh like net. And she came out wearing her dress. She's feeling so pretty. And then he's like, why is she wearing net? I can see her neck. I don't like that. That's not good. And, we had to tell him like, it's okay. She's covered. It's fine. Everything is okay. But, even he is able to like pick up on that, right? And now, he's 11 years old. He's not like a man yet, but he's getting to that age where he's starting to like notice when we go out, he starts to notice immodesty. And it really affects him because he says, why, God created her body so beautiful. Why is she doing that to herself? Why is she acting that way? Why is she, and he has got all these questions. So now he's like starting to notice, oh my gosh, the world is not perfect, but he's got the tools. Now he has the tools to look at a situation and say, no, that's not right. Based on what I know about God and the way God created human beings and our dignity, right? That's not right. Because, again, the principle is God created us with dignity. Our bodies are precious. They are the temple of the Holy Spirit. This body is not mine. It was given to me. I am to take care of it. I am the steward of it while I'm here on earth. So I can't just do whatever I want with my body. I have to take care of it, right? And because it's so precious, I use this analogy with my children, right? If you had, $100 bill is like such a big deal to them, right? So if you had like 10 $100 bills, would you just keep it in your pocket and just like for everybody to see? Would you walk around everywhere just like with $100 bills sticking out of your pockets everywhere? No, because that's a lot of money, right? You would never do that because it's a lot of money. You wouldn't go showing it to everybody. You would put it in your pocket, or you'd put it in a wallet, and you put in your, purse or in your pocket. So how much more valuable is our body, right? Do you want to just be flashing it everywhere to everybody, like so that everybody can see it? Aren't you cheapening that when you do that? And, asking these kind of questions and instilling these kind of ideas in our children's minds is like, I think it's helpful. It's very important, and it's helpful. Okay. Last thing I'm going to say, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm talking so much, but last thing I'm going to say, some practical things that were also asked in the questions for daily life. Schedules. Very, 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 very important. Very, very important. Very important. You have to have a schedule for everything. Okay. So again, clear expectations. Clear expectations. So important. When you have clear expectations and you follow through, children thrive off of schedules and clear expectations. So one of the questions was, if we're too strict, is that going to stifle our children's creativity? No. Research has shown that children and families that have clear routines and schedules are the highest achieving and most satisfied in their lives. Okay, so having a schedule. Now, again, some seasons of our life, if you just had a newborn baby, that's a totally different ballgame. Okay, so I'm not talking about that. But if you have children who are old enough, 1 year old, 2 years old, whatever, they're old enough to understand that they need to go to bed at a certain time. They wake up, they're going to have lunch, breakfast, snack, lunch, whatever, schedule. So important. Right next to schedule is sleep. So in the beginning of my parenting journey, I did not realize how important sleep was for children. So what we would do is we would have it would take so much time to put my son to sleep. So we'd just be like, it's okay. Just let him stay up with us. And, we'll just put him to sleep when we sleep. And we did that whole thing. Maybe some of you are doing that right now. It was a train wreck, right? Because in the next day, our children they're very tired. And that's when a lot of the behavioral issues stem from a lack of sleep. Again, scientifically proven that is one of the main reasons why children tend to act up, is because they are tired, right? And they don't have control over their faculties. They're just wired and they're just acting crazy because they don't know how to cope with that. So putting them on a schedule, putting them to bed at the same time every day, having that expectation that it is bedtime, it will be very, very good for you and for them. For you as parents, because that gives you time, right? Not just to clean up and whatever, but it gives you time to spend together, which is so important. That is the priority in your life. In your marriage is to spend time with each other, even if it's for like 30 minutes. Maybe you'll pass out, talking to each other in the bed, right? It doesn't matter. That time that you spend with each other is so, so important. Screen time. How do I say this? We have very limited screen time for our children. Again, every family is different, so I'm not saying that you should do the same thing. For us, we made it a decision early on that we were going to limit our children's screen time. Now they do get screen time, they have a limited amount every day. So they have an hour of screen time. They all know they have an hour after lunch for our children who are not in school. So the 4-year-old, the 3-year-old, 2-year-old, and the 5-year-old, right? They get some screen time during the day. The older children do not get any screen time until the weekend, because their focus during the week is school. And so they do not have any screen time allotted to them during the week, unless it's like an exception where, there might be something else going on. So the reason why we do that is because, again, there's a lot of science to show that the amount of like dopamine that gets released in children's brains when they are watching screens for more than, I think, like 10 minutes at a time, it's like the equivalent of like, cocaine, like a shot of cocaine, something like that. So I know it is very hard for me, it's very, very hard, because you have to like, oh, I have to make this dinner and I have to, put this on. Maybe that's a situation where you have to utilize it. But what I would say is like, try to utilize it as little as possible, so that it gives you guys, again, there's also a lot of behavioral issues that are associated with screen time. I don't know how much of this you guys already know, but like, there's a lot of links between, behavioral issues and the amount of screen time that children get. So sometimes the problems that we're creating ourselves by, trying to have like a quick fix, right? But then it's causing, more problems later on. Meal prep and feeding children. So this is like a whole topic all of its own. So I don't think I'm going to do justice here talking about it, but meal prep, again, essential for our lives. It's just, I'll just say this. It's just about being organized, right? When you're having children, when they're small, you have to be organized and you have to give that priority, especially if you're working. The times when I was working, right, it was really hard, because I would have to say no to a lot of things so that I can get my life in order, so that the weekdays can go smoothly with my family, right? So a lot of times that means that we have to organize ourselves during the week, during the weekend, so that we can, look forward to a week of like, meals and doing all the things that we need to do. So what I do is on Sunday, I sit down, I have a planner. I sit down and I look at my week and I say, okay, what are all the things that are happening? I fill in my week's planner. And I look and I see, okay, I need dinner on these days. I need to have this prepped ahead of time. We're going to eat out on this day or whatever. We're going to have company on this day, so I have to prepare for that. So it's about making a commitment to be organized, so that you can consistently do the things that you need to do on a daily basis. So Achin, I'm so sorry I went over my time. But I guess the last thought I'll leave you with, right, is just really to embrace your vocation. If you're married and if you're a parent, right, this is the life that God has planned for your salvation. This is how you are going to get to heaven. This is it, right? And so to fully embrace that, And these children that God has given you, they're like your little treasures, right? They're your little gifts, they're your treasures that God is given to you kind of on, kind of on loan. They're not your children. They belong to our Lord, right? And you are asked to be stewards of your children. Because one day you will have to give them back to the Lord, right? Or God will take them back from you at the end of our life, right? We have to render an account of our work. So there's the scripture story, the parable of the talents, right? Our children are the talents that are given to us. So we have the option of like multiplying them, right? Making them bigger, or burying them, right? And taking it up as like parenthood as a burden and stuff. And obviously, I know the group of people I'm talking to are people who obviously see this as a vocational call, but sometimes in the thick of it, right, it's hard to remember that, right? But just always to keep in mind, this is the road that God has planned for your salvation. So to fully embrace that in your married life. So I'll pass the mic or the whatever to Achin for questions.
So any more questions that you want to actually answer, that you need answers for, and then Femi can actually go through it. She did cover a lot of our questions, and basically her whole presentation was based on the questions, right? Right, Femi?
Yes, yeah.
So,
I tried to answer as much as I can, but Tony will be here in a second. I called him just now, so he'll be here. So maybe some of the dads will have some questions for him too. So he hasn't heard my talk, so he doesn't know what I said, or so there will be no bias. Okay, he's not going to be trying to like support me. He is a very supportive husband, but he's not going to be.
നിങ്ങൾക്ക് മലയാളത്തിൽ ചോദിക്കണമെങ്കിൽ ചോദിക്കാം.
Yeah, മലയാളത്തിലും ചോദിക്കാം, എനിക്ക് കുഴപ്പമൊന്നുമില്ല. ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ മാക്സിമം ട്രൈ ചെയ്യാം പറയാൻ.
എനിക്ക് ചോദ്യമൊന്നുമില്ല കേട്ടോ, എനിക്ക് കൊച്ചില്ല. ഞാൻ ചോദിക്കണം.
കേൾക്കാമേല.
Oh, sorry.
Jacobson, your audio is not correct. Can you? Maybe remove the iPod. iPod will remove it.
This is Tony, my husband.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
I like join mute my.
Yeah, ipa kya
Yeah, go. Hey guys, like I was just wondering, like when do you guys start like the homeschooling, right? After the first one, or after? Well, I mean, when like your first child is like about to go to school time, or
homeschooling, right?
Oh, homeschooling. Okay, so homeschooling is interesting. How it came about. I had always so this was always like in my mind. Okay, so I had always had this kind of nagging feeling in my heart about homeschooling, but I didn't think I could do it. I just thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard. Then I have to stop working. All these problems, right? Only one income. That was a big thing. So we put it off. Our son and our daughter went to school my son went for 2 years and my daughter went for 1 year. And after that, it just got to a point where I just felt like, my children are small. I want to spend that time with them. So now is the time for me to try it. And so we just kind of jumped in. And then that year it happened to be COVID too. So it kind of helped because then, everything was kind of a mess anyways. So I was like, oh, well, if I mess this up, then everybody's getting messed up. So it won't be too bad. They won't be too behind, I guess, So I just thought, to try it. And then we tried it for the first year. It was really hard. I'm not going to lie. It was really hard. I found out I was pregnant at the beginning of the school year. So the whole school year I was sick and I was tired. It was not easy. But the second year was much better, was much easier. And then after that, you know, our kids loved it. And the relationships that they have with one another is amazing, you know, because they see each other so much. And it also helps me to form them throughout the course of the day, right? So every little thing I can correct them, which is not always good, but I'm there when they have the questions. And so also it helps me to bond with them too. They know that I'm there with them, but also, one thing I didn't mention in the talk was how important it is for our children to have friends and other families who think the same way that we do, right? They need a community of people who think the way that you do and raise their children with faith in mind. If they don't have that, when they go to school, they see all sorts of things and they think that what you're doing at home is some weird thing that only you guys are doing. Does that make sense? So then all of a sudden, like your parents are the weirdos who are having all these like weird things that you're doing at home and like everybody else is like normal and you don't want that, right? But if they see my friend Joe's parents, they do the same things that, my parents do. And they're great. I love hanging out with them. That we get a lot of that with homeschooling, because we get to kind of tailor the people they're with. And again, everybody can make all sorts of arguments about like their education, especially being like, from Kerala, Malayali culture, right? Education is so important. And we say, well, how are they going to be competitive and how are they going to become doctors? We can make all these arguments, right? But at the end of the day, what's the most important thing? It's their holiness. They can become doctors, they can become neurosurgeons. It doesn't matter. They'll lose their soul for eternity, and that's not worth any price, right? Nothing matters at the end of the day if that is not accomplished. So I think homeschooling is like a calling. I think anybody can homeschool, meaning you don't have to have a teaching degree or you don't have to be, have a master's degree to homeschool. Anybody can do it if it's your calling, and sometimes it's not, sometimes it's not for everybody, and that's okay. But that's how it worked out for us. Do you have anything to say?
No, I think you covered it. I think COVID really pushed us over the edge to try it. And we had one of our daughters in school during that time. And, I think just there was a big difference between her going to school and her interactions and the kind of like, bonding that we have when she's at home versus away. We don't know what she's being fed, what, she's hearing, but we just have more control over their innocence, right? We want to protect their innocence, and we just felt more comfortable with it.
So what resources do you use for homeschooling? Because the biggest question is, will they be able to fight with the rest of the people who probably go through the schooling system? And I know that some places in homeschooling, they actually go to the classical way of studying things, like the classical studies would be used. So rhetorics, all those things would be part of the curriculum. What syllabus do you use for the kids, actually?
So we don't use a particular syllabus completely. And the reason is because our children have very different learning styles. So our son, he is very ultra focused and he will just go, just wants to get through his work. He's also very high achieving, right? So he will go through, math like it's nothing, like he just goes, right? Whereas our daughters are much more hands-on. They want to, learn with their hands. They want to learn by doing. And so their learning style is different. So based on their learning style, I can tailor their curriculums accordingly. So that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling is that like you can do that. You know, they can be successful in their own way without being like lumped up into like a group where we don't really necessarily have like all of the, you know, options, you know, of being able to do that. So because of that, you know, a lot of the things that they're learning, I know that it's sticking. You know, it's not going to like leave their mind, you know, in a month or in a year. And also like one of my main philosophies for homeschooling is that they love this so that they can love to learn, right? Because we know like as professionals, right? When you get into the workforce, you're always learning. You know, if you're an engineer, you're always keeping up with the newest thing, newest technology, or, you know, whatever it is, like you're always learning new things. So they have to like to learn. And that is what sets them apart from other people who are just going to school so that they can learn enough so that they can get a job, so that they can make an income, and then they can work for the rest of their life until they die, you know? So it's more so about like the whole person, looking at the whole person and making sure that they have like the the whole person is addressed, right? Not just like, you know, they're able to think logically, they're able to reason, you know. These are not skills that are taught in school anymore. It used to be, but it's not anymore. And so we have the freedom, you know, to tailor it accordingly. So
And I think I would add that we have the flexibility to allow the kids to learn more of something they're interested in, right? So we're a part of a co-op. So my son, he is doing robotics. He's 11 years old, right? And then all three of them, you know, we got them into this coding, online coding thing. They loved it, you know. And so the girls, they love sewing. So family knows how to sew, and so they did that, right? And last year we went to visit my sister in Phoenix. So Femia did this whole desert study thing, right? So while we were there, they knew all the cactus, everything. So you can kind of tailor to their interests and let them explore whatever they're more interested in versus being in school, you're kind of cookie cutter, you know, everybody does the same thing. So I think they learn to enjoy that flexibility and are more excited about learning because, you know, they're learning things that they are enjoying. So
and it's kind of unconventional sometimes, right? You know, like in school, you might have a textbook, right? Science textbook, and you're just learning from the beginning to the end. You're just learning all the things. But again, you know, if you look at historically, what is science? Science is paying attention to your surroundings, right? And observing what's happening around you. So, like a homeschool style science is like they might still have a book, but you know, our son, for some reason, you know, he really likes birds. So he now, you know, when we're driving, he's just like, oh, that's such and such. And oh, that I hear the call of a, you know, nightingale or some random bird. You know, he's just really interested. He's just really into that. And so he knows all this information. He's learned how to pay attention to and make observations about his surroundings, which is what science is, right? That's the basic, that's like the fundamentals of science. So it's unconventional. It's not the way you see, you know, in the world, like in the schools, but it's different. But you know, we're okay with it.
and just another small thing, we're also part of this, what do you call it?
It's like a
Riverside
homeschool club.
homeschool
Yeah.
club. So like one day they go and they're with other homeschool kids, but they do more like, you know, bird watching is one thing, training dogs, like they do all these random things. A couple of weeks ago my son said that they were in groups of three. They took them into the forest, gave them coordinates and a compass, and you know they had to find their way back to the home base, right? Like just things like that are so random, and but it's kind of like, you know,
Survival skills.
yeah,
You know.
you know, things that people used to know and some skills, you know, about the world and the world we live in. So it's there's a variety of things that they're learning.
Any other questions?
No questions.
You kind
Um,
of answered the question already. Like I was about to ask you, like, what are kind of the extracurricular activities? Like, I'm pretty sure, like with homeschooling, you already have a lot, but you already, kind of touch base on that.
yeah, we have a lot.
I think there's this myth that homeschool kids are gonna be weird. But our kids they were in MMA, my son's in wrestling, girls are in dance class. They're all in violin, piano. They're doing all these things too.
Guitar.
Guitar,
Yeah, they
yeah.
all play an instrument. They all have one sport they do. And the nice thing is that they can choose what they want to do. So there's no pressure whatsoever. They do what they want to do.
They just have
right?
to do something.
They just have to do something, So yeah. They have a very, very full social life.
A lot
So
of
like
driving.
too much too much of a social life.
Anyone else?
I have a question. At what age would you recommend them to having a cell phone, especially with all the social media?
We haven't crossed that bridge because none of them have cell phones. Oldest is 11. And when I drop my son off at wrestling, I want to give him a cell phone so that in case he can call us, right? So I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I've been speaking with a lot of other dads, and there are certain phones that are more restrictive. So I wouldn't go to T-Mobile and buy an Android and hand it to them. But then you're just, the floodgates are open. You don't know what's coming in. There are special phones and services that allow you to call only specific people and only do specific things. So I would explore
And that's
that.
not being like strict. That's not being strict. So remember we talked about sheltering and protecting, right? That's protecting them. They're not capable of understanding or using that device appropriately, and so like you're just protecting them. There's nothing to feel bad about it, in doing that.
It could be a very dangerous thing. I have someone very close to me that always tells me, Tony, the day that I handed a cell phone to my kids is the day I lost them. And he's having a lot of hardships with his kids, and I think at that time there wasn't enough, like education on the parent side to know how to maneuver this thing, right? But I think we have a lot more information, and we can learn from other people's experiences. And I think better to err on the side of caution. Of course, we want to give them something so that they can communicate with us. But we all grew up without cell phones, and there was a time when the world did not depend on cell phones too. But I think technology is good, and technology has a purpose, but it can definitely also be evil, right? So we just have to be very careful. I think also our purpose is to raise our kids for the world, right? And at some point, we have to start trusting them, right? And it's up to us as parents to kind of understand where they are. So in terms of their maturity, what they're capable of, building that relationship. At some point, we're gonna send them off to college, and we're not gonna be there to watch over them, right? So we do the best we can, and hope that they will make the right decisions, right? But in the time that we do have with them, we can't just say no cell phone. We kind of have to explain a little bit, so they understand as well. I think our kids understand.
Yeah, they don't have the desire to have a cell phone. They know. I think one of them once told me, he's like, "Yeah, I don't have this self control." That's what she said. It's like I don't have the self control for a phone. I don't need one. I was like, okay, I'm glad you think that because I think the same way. I don't think you have self control for a phone. But like our son, he went to wrestling. He doesn't have a cell phone. And I happened to be, they let him out a little bit early and I wasn't there because I didn't know he was supposed to be there. And I was actually there. He just didn't see me and he called me. So this was the amazing thing is like, I got a mysterious phone number calling me. It was some random person. He went up to a person. He asked them if they can give him if he can make a phone call. He made a phone call, called me, and I was there, and I talked to him, and like he had to think, right? He had to think, okay, now what do I do? I have this problem. Now I have to solve this problem. What do I do? Okay. And like kids nowadays, they're just like, like they don't know what to do. Like when there's a problem, they're just like, they panic and they freak out. I know so many kids who just sit there and they just start crying because they don't know what to do, right? Because they're always like spoon fed all of this, like they have all these luxuries, right? And they have all the stuff that they've lost the skill of like practical skills they're losing. So some of it is, it's like they're not going to die. They will figure it out, or they should figure it out. If they don't figure it out, then that's telling you something, right? That's telling us that's information. So,
And the moment you give a cell phone, specifically a smartphone, to a child, don't think you could ever take it from him.
no.
You can never, ever, ever, ever do that. A mother once told me if she could give a cell phone or smartphone to her, and I said, no, don't do it. But then, with a lot of peer pressure and all those things, she gave the phone to the child. Now she's regretting it a lot because
I
she's
think
just
that's
in high
another.
school. She's having Snapchat and all those stuff. There's no control over what she's doing right now.
And that's another luxury that we have too, because our kids, if they were in school and all their friends have cell phones, that would be harder. But I think that's kind of shielding us a little bit too, in terms of how they view that technology.
Yeah, again, like none of their friends have cell phones. They have one cousin that has a cell phone, but my son already, he comes to us and he says, so and so used his cell phone. He wasn't supposed to use it. His dad told him not to use it. I'm really disappointed that he did that, So he knows, like, okay, this is not good behavior. And when kids see that, you tell them, like, well, we don't copy bad behavior. That's not good behavior. We don't copy it. We, everybody's learning. He's learning. You try to be a good example, but there's no judgment on their part, right? We're not teaching them to like be like self-righteous, and say like, oh yeah, I'm so great, I'm following all the rules. No, we're all making mistakes. We're all learning, and that's not something that's good. But we just don't act like that. That's it.
I actually have another follow-up question. I know I'm taking the time to ask questions, but the question is this. So when there's a lot of peer pressure, right? Like I feel the peer pressure is what makes us sometimes allow few things which we don't actually want things to happen. What do you do when there is peer pressure? Because all the kids here, they're going to normal schools for the most part. They're not homeschooling. So the peer pressure is gonna be multiple, right? Like for your kids, maybe it's like limited because they're not going to public school. Peer pressure for them would be on a much more larger scale, so as to say. So how do you navigate that when I'm pretty sure that those things have happened, but how do you navigate that?
I think Femia and we talk about this sometimes. One thing that's very important for me is that they have friends with like-minded values, right? And they have a support. If they didn't have that and they go to school, as kids, they want to fit in. And that's a very big desire. You can remember when you were little, you want to be part of a friends group. You want to be part of something, right? And so if all you have is your school friends and they're all doing one thing, it's very one dimensional, and they will give in to peer pressure. But if they know, okay, this is not my only world here. I have my other friends. They're not gonna feel as lonely and as dependent on that certain group of people, and they may have more confidence to say no to things and have the wherewithal to know, okay, this is not right. I know this is not right because of X, Y, and Z, and be more confident in standing up for what they believe. That's just my theory. I guess we'll find out. Ask me another 10 years.
Yeah, I I think also like what we talked about before was relationships, right? Them having a relationship with you is so important, especially in those situations, because if they have a relationship with you, what they want to who they want to please and who's their compass, you know. That book that I mentioned, it talks about how all human beings have a compass. We have like this one thing that we're always following, right? And for children, their compass is supposed to be their parents. So if you are not fulfilling their needs, and if their attachment to you is not like a secure attachment, then they're going to use some other compass. Their compass will then become their peers, right? But if you're their compass, right, then it really doesn't matter too much. I mean, they're equipped then to handle those things, because really, if you think about it, this is not like going to be a problem for them just as children. It's going to be a problem for them like throughout the course of I mean, we deal with peer pressure, right? As adults, I know for sure, like many of my friends, that I was growing up with, they are living entirely different lives now than they did when we were younger, right? Maybe their values have changed, blah, blah, blah. But all the while, I have to stand on my own, and I have to say, like, no, these are my values and I'm going to stick to them. And I have to do that even as an adult. So it's a skill that they're going to need in the future, but they have to have a compass. They have to have a home in their parents, to look at.
I think also another thing that we do is, sometimes our friends that we grew up with, that we have strong friendships with, they don't share the same values. And sometimes we have to say, you know what, we're not going to have our kids hang out with their kids as much, because, it doesn't seem like a good idea, because of what they're going to be exposed to. And so sometimes we have to say no to our own friendships. Not that we cut them out of our lives, right? But that maybe we don't have as many play dates, or, I still have those relationships with them, but it's, we have the friendship. Our kids don't all, I don't know. It's just sometimes you have to make sacrifices for, in terms of what you want for the kids.
Other questions, please?
മലയാളത്തിലും ചോദിക്കാം എനിക്ക്.
Well, so sorry, what was the name of that book?
Hold on to your kids.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm saying all of these things, but maybe we'll talk again in 10 years and I'll tell you how it went. I don't know. I don't know if 10 years is going to be enough time, but we'll see.
Any other questions?
Like, your kids are still going to the CCD, right, at church? Or are you guys doing like by yourself, or?
Yeah, we do our own. We have religion every day. Like we teach them every day at home. So we don't send them to CCD at church. And that's a whole other topic. But yeah, we don't.
That is why in our CCD class, this year we actually started doing interview sessions with the associate HN before they are enrolled into teaching. So you have gone through that.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. But our son is an altar server, so we're still involved in the parish life. It's just not with CCD.
Because there's a big danger when it comes to CCD, and Femia has previously talked about this. The reason I wanted an interview session with them, just to know basically where they stand, is so that they will be teaching what the church teaches and not what they want. Sometimes people do that. So specifically in Chicago, I'm not talking about the cathedral, but I'm talking about St. Mary's. I've had that experience. So yeah.
I mean, CCD is supplemental, right? Like primarily that should be at the home anyways. We can't expect our kids to go to 1 hour CCD once a week. That can't be their faith formation, right? Like that has to be every day from the parents, has to be. And I think I noticed that sometimes people are in this misconception, especially some of our friends we spoke to recently, like 2 months ago, had a conversation, and they were looking for a CCD. In one church, they actually don't do CCD. They send materials home every week. And they're like, I don't have time for this, and then they went to another church that had the 1 hour CCD. But it's kind of the wrong way to think about CCD, right? Like CCD should be supplemental to what we're doing at home.
And there's no limit to what you can actually teach the child also. So I'll give you an example from St. Thomas Aquinas. When Aquinas was in a particular age or something, he was able to memorize the whole of scripture and a lot of the church fathers. This is because of proper teaching. നമുക്ക് കൃപ ലഭിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. Like we do gain graces for during baptism. Sometimes we limit it. CCD, like when I studied CCD, it's very factual. I didn't remember a single thing, even for the exam. But I memorized something and I just did it. Like I didn't understand anything. So it should go beyond that. That's what I will be saying. Because there's a lot more you can teach your kids than what is there in the Sorobalaba text, which is good, which is very solid, honestly. Now the teacher, we cannot be sure about.
Yeah, that is the problem. But I think, even if your children are not, even if they know nothing, do they love Jesus? Do they want, I always think of St. John Vianney, right? What a beautiful, amazing saint, right? How well did he do on his, priestly exams? I don't know. It's rumored not very well, right? Right, Achin? Am I right?
Yeah, I would say he didn't know Latin. So the normal way in which you need to learn those stuff, he didn't know any of those stuff.
Yes.
But his struggle in studies, in learning Latin, actually helped him in being more intellectual, actually. That's why he was a good confessor. That's what they say. And secondly, he was taught all of the basic theology in French rather than in Latin. So, but he was not able to answer a single word in Latin, which humbled him, which was the most important thing. But he and Aquinas, and sometimes you read a statement and you feel it's coming from Aquinas, it's actually coming from St. John Vianney. He doesn't use the same language, but he's using the same theology. So that is wisdom. അത് പഠിച്ച് ലേൺ ചെയ്യുന്നതല്ല, പരിശുദ്ധാത്മാവിനെ തുറന്നു കൊടുക്കുന്നതാണ്. Bernadette was absolutely not able to explain anything in class. Saint Bernadette. But she's a mystic in the church. So sometimes we are so focused on teaching them catechism, which is important. But the most important grace that they need is actually wisdom and not knowledge. So that is the difference.
Yeah, and I sorry, this just came up in my mind from the questions. Sometimes we think that we've reached like the limit of what we can do as parents. We think, okay, I can't homeschool them, or I can't, stay home with them, or I can't do this, this, and this. And that's like the moment where God is asking us to give more, right? When we're at the brink of like feeling like, oh, this is the most I can give, maybe that's the moment that God is asking for even more from us. And we feel like we can't give any more, but that's when we have to give more. And somehow we find it in ourselves to give more. But, like I will say personally, I never thought I would have 7 children. Okay. That was not my like, oh, I'm going to go have 7 children. No, definitely not. Was not in my plans. And as each child came, I thought to myself, how am I gonna like do this, but every time there was this grace that God was granting to me, right? And even when I when I thought I could not possibly have, could not handle another child, right? That was a moment where, you know, like God proves me wrong, right? And it's like he proves me wrong, and he says, like, this is how you're going to become holy for me. Just allow me to make you holy, right? Sometimes we get in our own way and we say, oh, I can't do this, or this is too hard. Like, I'm at my limit, or whatever, you know. It's not easy, right? Like, we have a single income home, you know. Thankfully, Tony has a good job and he works very hard, you know, but still it's a single income home. But somehow God, like, we've never been deprived of anything that we wanted or needed, right? And that's like very hard to imagine. But again, like, when we're at that brink, when we're at that breaking point, is when God asks us something and we just give. And God is showing, you know, he's showing me, or he's showing us, right? This is what I desire from you. I want to make you holy, you know. And I think as parents and as spouses, you know, married couples, like, we have to embrace that. We have to say, okay, God wants to make me holy. Okay, I'm not going to get in the way. So,
Any other questions or not? We'll have to wind up. ഒരു 2 minute കൂടെ തരാം if someone wants to ask any question. Okay, so I guess we'll wind up for today.
yes. So Achin, if you like, we're totally okay if you want to share our information with them, like our email or our phone numbers. We can, you know, if you ever have any questions or anything, just feel free to reach out. So,
Just send it to me and I'll send it to the WhatsApp group.
sure. Yeah. Thank you. I hope we didn't bore you too much.
Definitely.
I tried to get through as much as we could. So.
Okay. Aditya?
But anyways, this was very, very informative. No, sorry. Hello, hi. Anyway, Matthew Nana. So anyways, I want to thank you both for taking your time from your busy schedule of 7 kids. We have 4. I don't know how you do. But thank you. Really appreciate this class. We a lot of good information, you know. Thank you so much for your time and effort. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody here.
Okay, of course.
And hopefully, we could continue this, in the future, with, as they grow, and as our kids grow, your kids grow, we'll have more questions that come up, So definitely we could do this one of these sessions maybe every several months,
Yeah, we can, if there's a specific question or if a specific topic that you want to discover, and if Femia and Tony is available at that time and we can speak about it, then we'll definitely do those sessions.
Sure.
Yep.
All right.
Well, have a good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Guys, and thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Femia.